So the final assignment in our course, which we're going to discuss today, is the persuasive speech. This speech is going to be due on April the 16th, so you have 2 weeks to complete it. You don't have to turn in the preliminary stuff like the research sources or the outline like last time, but you do want to go through the process of organizing your speech, of finding good sources. You have to use at least one expert source for the speech. That speech is going to be found in Module 8, which is our final module. Let me put this in student view for you. So it's a little bit less busy. There we go. Okay. So here in Module 8, Chapter 15 goes over persuasion and persuasive speaking. And when you go into Module 8, you'll see there is a sample speech, which is a good thing to watch to get some perspective on what it is you're supposed to be doing. Actually, down here also, I think this is the sample speech for the student one. Let me double check. This might be the course one. Yeah, the one you want is actually, and I'm going to remove this one because that one's old. This one here is one I uploaded that a student did in a previous semester. So this is the one you want. When you go into the video presentation, it lets you know that you have to do a speech that's 1 to 2 minutes. The purpose of this one, instead of to inform, which is what the nonprofit one was about, is to convince the audience to, and you'll see it's here, and I'm going to make it a little bit bigger for you if I can. I don't know if it'll zoom in. There we go. There we go. All right. Is to use Monroe's motivated sequence from chapter 15 for a 1 to 2 minute video presentation. You can do yours in class if you want to, and that'll be done, I believe that's the 17th. Let me double check. That's the day after the video one is due, right? So if you want to do yours in class, it'll be done on April the 17th. So that 1 to 2 minute speech is persuading us to go see either a full-length feature movie or documentary you've seen. I recommend movies instead of documentaries because sometimes when discussing a documentary, it turns more into an informative lecture about the topic of the documentary than about the quality of the documentary itself. So your purpose here is to convince us to go see a movie. But in order to be persuasive, you can't just give us facts and information because that would be an informative speech. You have to use persuasive techniques and talk about reasons why people need to go see the film. And that's going to go beyond facts. It's also going to present opinions, things like opinions from movie critics. You have to be very careful when you're presenting information for this one, though. A lot of people put their opinions on movies on the internet and blogs, etc. But since it has to be an expert source, then you're going to want to use a source that comes from a verified person who's in the industry. So, for instance, like a movie critic who works for an entertainment magazine, for instance, like Variety or Rolling Stone, or a movie critic who works for a newspaper like the Tampa Bay Times or the New York Times or anything like that. Stuff like that would be acceptable. You want to make sure you don't use websites like IMDb or Rotten Tomatoes because those are not primary sources. They are taking summaries from other places and putting it onto their website. But you might be able to backtrack to a primary source. If it shows you the name of the critic and the newspaper, then you can go to that original article and use the original article. Obviously, if you're taking something from the database, then you're not going to have any problems. But when it comes to talking about and incorporating your expert source, again, in order to be persuasive, don't just present facts. Just because you give information about a movie that it made X amount of dollars at the box office does not mean that's a reason to go see the movie. Just because it stars somebody famous doesn't mean that's a reason to go see the movie. You have to give people more than that to go and see it. It could be because of the visual effects, and maybe the critic talks about that part of the film. Maybe the film gives an important lesson or teaches the audience something. So those are the types of opinions you want to incorporate into your speech, because if you don't, then you're only going to have a factual speech and therefore not a persuasive speech at all. So it's very important that you carefully choose your source and also the content from your source. That's where people can kind of mess up this speech. They use their source to tell us that the movie stars Tom Hanks. Well, that's not an opinion, that's a fact. And therefore, it's not actually adding anything to your discussion. You're not giving the audience something they couldn't have found in 3 seconds themselves. Okay. So you want to incorporate some of that good critique from an expert. Like I said, the database is going to be the place to start because then you don't have to worry about whether or not your source is legitimately a primary source. But if you can't find something from the database, it is okay to go into the internet as long as you find, again, an expert source. And of course, if you want to, you can email me your links and I can tell you whether or not you should use that website. Another thing to keep in mind is that that opinion has to come from an outside expert, not from the people making the movie. If you find an interview with the director of the film and they say that their film is really important for people to see, well, yeah, of course they say that. They want you to watch their movie. That's a biased opinion. So you need to have an outside expert who's not affiliated with the film. And that's why you want to go to things like movie critics and things like that to find an opinion about why the film is worth watching. Now, in order for you to go through this speech and using what was called that Monroe's motivated sequence, you'll want to take a look in that module 8, actually. There is a grading criteria, and that's meant to go along with the PowerPoint for chapter 15, which in class, I wasn't going to go over the entire PowerPoint. I was going to show you just the Monroe's part. Here we go. So the Monroe's motivated sequence is basically a 5-step organizational plan that integrates a problem solution method. Problem. What movie should I watch? I don't know. Solution. Whatever movie you're recommending is a solution for the audience's problem. In this particular instance, because you're being given a prompt. There are 5 steps to this. The first one is to get your listeners' attention. Now, the introductory methods for the persuasive speech are the same as informative speeches, which were in chapter, I think 12 and 13, where it talks about how to set up your informative speech. But a lot of these still work. Some work better than others, depending on the type of movie that you're watching. Okay, so facts and statistics, that might go really well for a film that's based on history or talks about a really important idea or thing that happened in the past. If that would get someone's attention, for instance. The need, tell your audience about the problem. In this case, they need to know what movie to watch, right? And then argue basically, why do they need this? So in essence, why do they need to see this film? This is a good step in order to incorporate that expert source. Well, according to John Smith, the New York Times, this movie is a must-watch because, and then giving that critic's opinion about why this movie was so groundbreaking or important to people or what they're going to learn from it. Satisfaction, explain how to satisfy the need. Well, if you're going to tell someone to go see a movie, if you need to then tell them where they can find it. Is it in theaters? Is it on Hulu? Is it on Amazon Prime? Can you rent it? Can you get it for free somewhere? So you have to then give them the information they need to go and watch that movie. Visualization, give your audience a sense of what change would be like, paint a picture. This is basically a usage of imagery. You do want to explain the movie and the plot at some point, and you don't have to do all of these points, especially in the middle in order. Obviously, you want to start with the attention getter. And then it is good to put your critic or your expert source up front, because that's when you have your audience's attention. You lose attention as you go through the speech. So it's good to then kind of follow that up with, or moving straight into, why you need to see the film. But if it doesn't make sense right there, just because of the content that you're presenting, you can start swapping things around. Okay. For instance, you might want to jump into a plot summary first, but don't give away the end of the movie. If you tell everyone the end of the movie, then they don't need to see it anymore. But you want to then give that plot summary. This, again, should be brief because you only have 1 to 2 minutes total. So keep in mind, you really can only give a few points about the plot to get the audience interested. So what parts are you going to talk about? Some people, for instance, like to swap these around and put the satisfaction at the end because it can be easy to move into an ending about, well, here's where you can find the movie now that you're dying to see it. So sometimes people like to move these around. And again, that's okay as long as you're hitting the 5 points. The action, adapt the solution, identify what you want them to do, offer actions they can take. This is really the conclusion. And if you think about the last speech, you're kind of moving into a wrap up and a clincher right at the end. So for this part, it's kind of just spurring the audience into action one more time. So here's what you got to do. You got to go see the movie for these reasons, etc. Okay. So you're going to kind of have one final push about why they've got to go see this film at the end of your speech. And then you want to end strong on a clincher, something that's going to have an impact. Now, these 5 steps, if you take a look at the checklist for this speech, which is in module 8, right here, that grading criteria, this set of criteria is a little bit different than the informative one. Okay, this is not the same criteria as was in module 7. So you do want to take a look at the differences. Specifically, you'll notice some parts I've highlighted in bold. These bold parts are actually the Monroe's sequence. Okay, things that I'm looking for again when I'm listening to it, listening to your speech, when I'm grading your speech, I'm looking for this content. Obviously, the credible source is another part of that, and that's also a requirement for the speech. You have to have at least one expert source that you're going to incorporate. Other parts like delivery are the same. Okay, but you want to make sure you include the Monroe sequence parts so you don't have deductions that are unique to this particular assignment. So once again, just like the last one, if you're doing the video, you have one take. You can't cut, edit, or alter your video in any way. You still want to maintain all of those good recording concepts, like you have to stand, good lighting, dress appropriately, use your body language, have a good tone of voice. So don't just practice the words, practice the delivery. It's a good idea to sketch out an outline for yourself, just so you know what's going to be your intro, what's going to be your thesis statement, right? How are you going to end your intro? Don't forget to transition using signposts. Now that I've told you about what about the plot of the film, next I'm going to tell you where you can go see it. So, you want to have signposts as a part of it. The sample speech is on the movie Soul, which is an animated feature, so you cannot do that one. The instructions also state it has to be 2014 or later. I'm okay if you do something that was made before 2014 as your movie choice. But again, before you really choose a film, I would recommend you find your expert source just so you know you have one and you don't have to change your speech idea later. Okay. You will then record your video. You can use the My Courses tool, or if you're using your own recording device, you can upload that video to like your OneDrive or YouTube, and then you can post it here. Oh, it's not listed here, but I'll add it. You do also want to include your works cited for your one research source. If you want more than one source, that's fine. But you should also have your MLA works cited submitted along with the video. Okay. Now, if you have any questions, then of course you should definitely reach out to me. Again, I really encourage you to watch that sample speech. I feel like that will really kind of put it into perspective about how to move through the process of the speech and the content, since you're not doing a formal outline for this one. If you do decide to create your own outline, you're welcome also to email it to me just to make sure everything looks in line and things like that. So feel free to send me anything you're working on and I can give you some feedback on it. And once you've done that, you've completed the last assignment for the course. So well done. And I will be available in class in case you need, any coaching or help or anything like that. Okay. So feel free to reach out to me anytime.